Hello and welcome to this short presentation about recursive self-improvement or how to never make the same mistake again. So what is the background of this talk? Well, there was a project manager with the name Donald and he was in a hurry as usual, and because of that he was making a mistake. Yeah, he slipped on something that he did not saw coming, and then what happened? There was an accident. But to avoid this, he made some notes in his notebook so that he remembers and next time does not fall into the same trap. But then there was another project manager, we call him Goofy, and he did not know about the mistake and the notes from Donald. So he dropped again into a similar hole and made a similar mistake. And now, well, to avoid this in the future, the team decided, hey, let's have a meeting together. Let's gather everyone and then meet and share the knowledge that we made about this hole and how to avoid it. Now, this helps, but the question is, where's the problem? And I listed you a couple of problems from this approach. Well, first thing is people who are not participating in the meeting, they don't know about this issue and how to avoid it. Second thing is, if you do not know what you want to find and you do not know that this knowledge and learnings exist, hey, you might not care. Then the important thing is the lessons learned, they are needed later and in the context of your work, not during the meeting. The whole thing does not scale and the documentation is rather scattered. So if Donald has a notebook and Goofy and someone else, then this is not ideal. So what can be a solution? Well, the solution is drafted here. And what we are doing is we need a capture part. We capture the knowledge and store it somewhere. In my case, I use Dataverse. And once this is stored, then we can use agents or any other tools to grab this knowledge and have a communication with the user, Goofy in our case. And before I'm talking long, let's have a quick look at the agents that I created for this. And I created two of them because one in the old and one in the new user interface. So let's have a quick look at how they are configured and how can they help you. Okay, so I'm here in Copilot Studio. You can see the old user interface that I was mentioning. And then here on the right side, I tested my agent where a user asked a question about lessons learned from the reconstruction of a building. And then you see, hey, here is the answer. And the answer is, of course, based on knowledge that is related in my lessons learned table in Dataverse. We will come later to the point how we store this data. But the user interface is pretty straightforward. And of course, you would not test it here, but use one of the channels that we have available. Now, second thing is I tried the same in the new user interface to make it a bit transparent and compare things. What I used here is a MCP tool of Dataverse because the Dataverse knowledge is currently not available in this environment. So I use this MCP tool. I ask a similar question. Hey, is there any learning available from a project to bridge construction? And then you see, hey, we had a couple of things and learnings that the person can make use of. So very straightforward. The only difference is here the kind of connection tools that are used, either on MCP server or here the knowledge with the Dataverse tool. Okay, so that's the user experience. And of course, as I mentioned, you can publish this in different channels where the user is and where they can make use of that. But now let's go back and have a look at how we can get the knowledge inside of this database because that's the most important part. Okay, so we are back here in my PowerPoint. And from this process, I mentioned that the capture part that I highlighted in red color here is one of the most important things. And I thought, hey, how can we capture this kind of knowledge and these lessons learned? And I found a couple of different methods that I want to introduce. Of course, there might be more, but I want to give you some kind of ideas what you can use for that. And I differentiated these kind of capture methods into some methods that provide a small guidance versus those that provided really a guided experience. Yeah? And I will start with the small guided experiences that include flows, team integrations, some forms, some word, and so on. But rather than talking about things on the slides, let's have a look into my demo machine where I prepared all of that so that you can have a look and get a feeling how you can capture this kind of lessons learned in a small guided experience. Okay, so I'm here in my demo environment. I have here my lessons learned table in Dataverse, and you can see that I added different columns for identifying, hey, what were the underlying reasons, what were the consequences, how did I handle the problem, and so on. And now the question is, of course, how do we fill this table? And in this short first sequence, I want to show you the first two methods that I thought about. The first one is flow. So in my case, it's triggered manually, but you can trigger this based on some activities. So maybe a project stage is finished, or a task has been completed, or something happened. And then I have here a request for information element. And this one is basically sending out a message to teams. In my case, it's going to the administrator, but you can design this flexibly. It asks a couple of questions, and then what does it do? It adds rows into my lessons learned table. That's all what is happening. So let's have a quick test how this works. So I started manually for my testing purpose. And then once we run this flow, we should see a notification in Teams. And then once we are in Teams, you see that there is here this message coming up, and then you enter your reason. I just enter here reason, consequences, handling, difference, and then info. And then you just submit this thing, which creates the record in Dataverse. So that's super easy, but as you see, it's not guided. You just fill something, there's no question back. It just takes this information, fills it, and adds a row into our Dataverse table. And the second option that I want to show you is kind of similar. Yeah. So what did I do for the second kind of capturing? Well, I used here forms. Yeah. And the idea is similar. You have different elements that you send out. Yeah. And again, what are we using? We use a flow. Yeah. When a response is submitted, you get the details and you add a row into the Dataverse table so that you can have all of this knowledge available for your knowledge workers that have then an information about what might go wrong in a project. So these were the first two use cases. Now let's stop this sequence and have a look at two others that I also prepared. Okay, so the next two methods that I want to show you are also by a bit of creative, but they use out-of-the-box tools that you have available. And you see I'm currently in Microsoft Word. Why? Because I have here a summary of the project that I did. And what would be the use of this, or how would the user create it? Well, here there is a dictation functionality where you do not have to write down all of these things, but can say, hey, please create such a document. And instead of typing all of this information, just speak. Yeah. And once you speak all the information in your experience, your lesson learned, save it somewhere. And in my case, I said, hey, use it here somewhere or store it somewhere in a special folder, lessons learned. Yeah. And then what happens? Again, we use a flow. When a file is created, basically I take the file content and then I add a row into my database table. So super easy. Only thing you have to be aware of, and that's what you have to configure, is what do you want to extract from this flow. So I said here, I need the reason, direct consequences, handling, and description, and then I use a JSON output, because with this JSON output, it's much easier to add the new row elements, because you can just directly refer to these JSON elements instead of reformatting them. So this is another very easy way how do you can allow people to record lessons learned for your table. A kind of similar approach is the next one. The next one refers to recordings. So what are recordings? Well, what you can do as well is you can create a Teams meeting. So invite your colleague who made the experience, record the meeting, and once the meeting is recorded, it will end up here. And prerequisite is, of course, that you allow the transcription of this recording. And once this is done, you can then again use a flow to extract the information and fill your table. So in my case, I said, hey, when a file is created, I get the content and I use here Whisper. Well, that's not really necessary. There are graph connectors that can do things for you, but I use Whisper to get the plain text of what was spoken, mainly because of some data loss prevention policies and some other things that I had to overcome in my tenant here. And then once I have the plain text, I use same prompt and I add a new row. So these are kind of similar approaches where people are allowed to speak. But again, once again, the issue is there is no guidance. So people just think and speak what comes to their mind, and then you get this information and try to extract it via this AI prompt to fill it into our lessons learned table. Might be a good approach, might be not working for you, um, but that's something you can better assess than me. And therefore, I have a couple of more approaches, but they make use of different techniques. So let's stop here and then jump to the next one where I want to explain a bit more. Okay, so for the last unguided way how to capture lessons learned, I started here in the Dataverse table, and what I did was I added a new column that I called lessons learned input. And why did I do that? Well, you will see in a minute. Based on that, I said, hey, create me a Power App. The Power App that I created is this one. And why did I do that? Well, because I wanted to make use of a special feature. And this feature is this one here at MCP. So you can basically use this app as a MCP. You can download this and then integrate it into M365. So I have it here open. Yeah, and then you can really chat with your data and you will see I asked already a couple of questions about my records, for example. It lists me all of the learnings that I have. And then you can directly jump and open the Power App from here. And of course, what you want to do is you want to create new lessons learned. And that's also what you can do directly from here. But if you stay inside of your browser, that's maybe not perfect. And that is why you have the possibility to integrate that also with your mobile app. So let me show this on my phone. So here you should see my phone. And what I have here is a preview version that's not available publicly yet, but this version allows you to integrate this kind of agents, yeah, or your apps here inside. So here I have my movie app, yeah, it's a different one, but just to give you an impression that it also works on mobile phones, yeah, that you have this experience on the go. And the difference here is if you create a new record here, you can make use of your loudspeaker functionalities that you have on your mobile phone. Another option would be, of course, if you use Power Apps. Yeah? If you created an app, hey, you can open it here. Yeah? Here's my lessons learned app that I created. And what you can do here is you can simply create new records and also make use of the loudspeaker functionality that you have. Yeah? So if you create something new, you have here this big field, and then you can type or just speak in what you think. And with that information stored in our Dataverse table, because this information will go to this specific field, this new field. And then what I'm doing is what I did before. So you know the story. We have, when a new row is added, yeah, then I look for the specific field, run a prompt, and then I fill the other fields in my Dataverse table to make sure I have records for the handling, the project info, what we would have done differently. So this is a very powerful tool because it's really easy to implement. It already works with your existing Power Apps and it integrates nicely in your mobile phones or into M365, wherever you prefer to work and how you try to record this information. Okay, so that's the first part for the unguided or small guided experience how to record lessons learned. Now let's stop this recording at this point and have a look at how we can provide more guidance for the user and have a better interaction that makes sure we have really good quality data. So that will be part of my next video sequence. Okay, for a more guided approach of collecting the lessons learned, I have here a new Copilot Studio agent. And what you can see is that I created this one with the new interface. The reason is because the kind of interaction that I wanted to have only works with this kind of experience and the user interface that we have. If you use the old one with the topics and so on, it is not really working. And actually, the setup is actually super, super easy. So the only thing you have to give it is a kind of instructions. Hey, to collect lessons learned, yeah, ask questions, give bullet points, and then once you are completed, you tell the agent that it should create a record in my Dataverse table. And of course, you have to give it the tools. So in my case, this tool is basically nothing else than a Dataverse connection to my table. I put the inputs, the environment, and the table name and the other things. This is basically automatically filled or filled with AI. So that's what you can configure. And then with this simple setup, so you need only a connection to a database table, a couple of instructions, you can really have a great conversation. And I just show you what I did before to save some time. So I wanted to report about a new learning. Then I get a question. Then I give a short answer, and yeah, well, then it says, hey, I need more information. And you can see if I scroll through that the questions are coming back and forth, and that at the end of the day, a new record was created in my Dataverse table. And well, that's the record, and this is then the basis for the new lessons learned that we can record or inquire with the Groovy agent that I showed you at the very beginning. So, from my experience, this is a super simple but very, very powerful kind of agent that can help you guiding your users really through the necessary information that nothing is missed. And then you know, of course, that we can publish this, for example, to M365 or Teams, so that the users can even talk with the agent if they want to. So, because here you have your microphone functionality, you can open it here and then speak everything inside and have a real conversation. So that's the first kind of guided lesson or capturing your lessons learned that I wanted to share. Let's make a quick stop here before I jump to the last one. Okay, so the last capturing method that I want to share with you is basically an agent that I created in Foundry. So I created here a lessons learned inquiry agent in Foundry. I gave it some instructions similar to the one that I used in Copilot Studio. I told it to create a Word document as the kind of documentation that I needed, because I wanted to see what is the outcome before I write things into Dataverse. So I said, hey, please create me a Word document, and then I use a Power Automate flow to extract the information as before using these AI prompts. And then, of course, I also said I want to have voice mode and use an avatar. So I used here this kind of avatar. And then there is a possibility to show this on a website. So you can preview this if you just want to test it as I wanted to do it. And then you can have a conversation and you can see how was the conversation going. The avatar is basically asking me about the question. And then finally, it creates this document. And the document is then stored on OneDrive as I instructed. And then we have these lessons learned. And then you know the path, the way forward. Extract the information from this, use a Power Automate flow, and then fill the different columns in our Dataverse table as a knowledge source. So this is the last capturing method that I wanted to share with you. Of course, it's maybe the most sophisticated one. Maybe you need some additional help to create all of these things, but instead of having a kind of conversation via text or via voice input, you can really talk to a kind of virtual person and really make sure that you get very high quality data that you can then use as your lessons learned when it comes to telling other colleagues or recording lessons that you learned that you should not do again. Okay, that's the last demo part that I had. So let's go back to the PowerPoint for a quick summary. So at the end, a short summary here of the different ways that I showed you how to capture lessons learned. And what I want to highlight here again is the small guidance or no guidance ways and the guided ways. Yeah. So if you have a look at the non-guided ways first, I created a summary. This is my personal opinion. Yeah. Then these things where you have a Power Automate flow integrated with Teams, where you collect some information or where you create forms and an agent flow, or where you just dictate something in Word, that is super easy to set up, and super easy to implement. It's also very cheap, but the level of detail of the information that you get might not be good. A Teams meeting might be better, but the complexity is also getting a bit more. And finally, we had a look at, hey, how can we use a Power App and the MCP integration into Copilot, or how can we show this on our mobile app? Yeah, the complexity here is a bit higher, but still it's pretty easy if you are used to working with these tools. Cost and level of detail are okay-ish, let's say. Then if we have a look at the guided principles, here we had a look at Copilot Studio agents. Well, the complexity depends on your knowledge and how familiar you are with these tools. I would say it's small to medium. The level of detail is, of course, great because you really have an interaction and you get asked questions based on your previous one. So you can really have a good conversation. The costs are, of course, a bit higher, but it depends. And the last one, where we saw the avatar integration, of course, that's the most complex to configure, but still, I would say it's doable even for non technical people. The level of detail is great, of course, because you're really asked to provide all the details, but the costs are, of course, the highest. So that's what I have as a summary from my perspective. Important, what I showed you here is not supposed to be used for recording lengthy lessons learned. For example, when offboarding employees, when you want to capture interviews and text for a couple of hours. What I want to capture here is some kind of information, lessons learned from projects or from tasks or activities that you have and that you want to share with others. So, what you need to make sure is if you make use of such a tool that you regularly review, update, and delete all this old and outdated collected knowledge. Because over time you might collect so many information that some of this might be outdated, and you have to make sure, hey, your data source is good so that it helps other people. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share with you. I hope you found it interesting and can use it in your work. And then I and all of these friends here would like to thank you very much for watching and listening. And we look forward to seeing you next time.